Hey there, and welcome to this episode of the podcast, which is all about hypothyroidism. And it comes from a listener question, Mr. Martin Smith, who very generously gave a donation to the podcast. And in return, he asked a question which I have investigated, I have researched, and I have brought you the evidence-based answer to that question. Namely, does hypothyroidism A, affect weight loss? B, how does it affect weight loss if that's the case? And C, is there anything you can do specifically to overcome those effects? Now, Martin's specific question was this. It's actually a question for his partner. His partner is desperate to lose weight but suffers from thyroid issues. She is prescribed thyroxine by the doctor. She had gained quite a lot of weight and has tried everything, including starving herself, keto, the lot. Should the principles of a calorie deficit remain the same, or is she a special case? That's what we're going to be investigating in today's episode of the show. Now, if you are watching this on YouTube, then please like the video, subscribe to the channel. That would be absolutely awesome. Helps us grow the reach of this channel on YouTube. Likewise, if you are listening to this on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever else you consume your podcast, make sure you give a little bit of a rating, a review, and also subscribe to the show so you get notified when the daily podcasts drop live and you can be one of the first to listen in. So let's get right into Martin's specific question talking about thyroid issues. Now, thyroid issues, hypothyroidism in particular, is often used as like a little bit of a throwaway term by people who struggle to lose weight. They feel like they try everything possible. They've tried all the various different diets. They've tried the calorie deficit. They've been on very, very low calories, but still nothing happens despite all of that. And then when you throw the exercise, the step count, all of these things into the mix, they kind of feel like there must be something wrong with me. It's the case that the calorie deficit just doesn't work for me, or there's something going on with my hormones or something going on with my body that is meaning that I'm not actually one of these people that can lose weight this way. And hypothyroidism is often one of those things that's thrown out there. But there are very, very few people that actually suffer from this. And you can go to your doctor and get tested for it. So if you are at all concerned, then you can speak to your GP or your doctor about that exact issue. But it's very, very, very unlikely that you actually have it. Most of the time, it comes down to adherence. It comes down to the fact that you're not sticking to that calorie deficit, even though you think you are. You may think that you're doing all of these various different things, but there's often so many ways that you can underreport how many calories you're consuming and also overestimate how many calories you're burning. Even if you feel like you're doing everything right, you're following everything to the letter, there's still lots of room for human error to come into that process that you may not be aware of. So I'm going to talk about hypothyroidism and how it does affect weight loss, but I don't want you to sit there thinking you've got a little checklist saying, that's me, that's me, that's me, I've definitely got this, that's my issue, because it's probably not. However, in this case with Martin, his partner has been diagnosed with it, been given medication for it. So this is a specific example where we can now talk about how hypothyroidism does affect weight loss. Now, the first thing to talk about probably is, well, what's going on here when we're talking about thyroid and what are we actually talking about? So if I run through, roughly speaking, what happens. So at the beginning, you've got your hypothalamus in your brain. That releases thyroid releasing hormone, and that goes into the pituitary gland. From the pituitary gland, you get thyroid signaling hormone that goes into the thyroid. From there, you get T4, which is an inactive hormone. Then that gets converted into T3, which is the active variant of that. All a little bit complicated. Probably don't need to know that in a great amount of detail. So what hypothyroidism is an underactive thyroid system. You're basically not producing the hormones as you should in a normal environment. Now, what that does lead to is a potentially slower metabolism. So your metabolic rate is slower than the average person. Therefore, means that if you were to go through somebody's calorie calculator like mine, it might come out with, let's say for argument's sake, that your BMR is 1800 calories. If you've got hypothyroidism, that's obviously not taking that into consideration. Now, if you've got hypothyroidism, potentially your metabolism is that bit lower. So it's not 1800 calories, it's lower. Therefore, if you're trying to diet and you're using a calorie calculator, but you're unaware of hypothyroidism as an issue that you have, you could be overeating, which causes you not to make the progress that you think you should. Now, that can also lead to increased fat and water weight gain. Now, that's usually in the region of about 5 to 10 pounds. Again, they're just like rough averages to work with. Some people will be a little bit lower, some people a bit higher. But generally speaking, people are in that 5 to 10 pound range. And that's going to be a mix of body fat and water. So there are the key differences that you're going to find between someone who has hypothyroidism and someone who doesn't. Generally speaking, it's going to be a slightly slower metabolism. It's going to be a bit of a water weight gain and a bit of a fat gain, somewhere in the region of 5 to 10 pounds. Now, clearly, the first port of call is going to be your doctor. I'm not a medical professional. You shouldn't take medical advice from me. I'm only telling you from a nutritional perspective what I would be looking to do and how I would be adjusting your nutrition based on this particular issue. I would go to your GP and always refer you to your doctor for the actual medical advice that you definitely do need in this scenario. In most cases, you're probably going to get medicated for hypothyroidism. Now, there are different variations of it. And again, your doctor will talk you through those. But generally speaking, you're going to get some form of synthetic T3. This is basically what you're going to get. And that is going to basically sort out those thyroid issues. And typically speaking, for most people, that will just bring you back up to normal. And then all of the other things apply. It's not necessarily going to be any different when it comes to losing weight. So the key thing here is that, yes, the calorie deficit still remains the principle. A calorie deficit still works, albeit if you've got hypothyroidism, it might be slower in terms of your metabolism, so your calories might be reduced. But if you're medicated, that might not even be a problem for you. So again, that medication is going to be important. Now, beyond that, there's not many other things specifically that you need to think about. So you don't need to go keto. In fact, keto probably will be a slightly worse option for you to go for. Maybe slightly higher carb might work for you. Now, other than that, there really is no special diet, no special protocol to follow. It's going to be about understanding where your calorie intake needs to be and how to construct your diet and your nutrition so that you can adhere to that for the long term. Now, again, you could use a calorie calculator. I think once you've gone through medication with a doctor, you could use a calorie calculator to start estimating the ballpark of where your calories need to be. It would then be advisable, probably in the early stages at the very least, to track your calories in MyFitnessPal. That will give you a rough idea of how many calories you're consuming, and then you will have an idea of how many calories you're burning and how close you are to that target. Now, at this point, you've got to realize that your journey, for want of a cliched word, is exactly that. It's a journey. You don't necessarily have to make instant progress from day one. What you've got to realize is that every step of the way is that you're gathering information and data about you, your specific body, and how you react to certain situations. Now, it could be that you start off with a calorie intake, let's say 1600 calories, something like that. For a female in this situation, that might be a rough ballpark of where you end up. Now, if you're very, very diligent and you're not losing weight on 1600 calories, then you can make a calorie adjustment. You can make a calorie adjustment down, go to maybe 1500 calories. Does that signify some form of weight loss for you? Again, don't worry too much about hormone diets. Don't worry about a specific macro split or anything like that. I wouldn't go like super low carb or anything like that. But beyond there, you have the freedom to choose foods that suit your preferences. And overall, when we're looking at the symptoms of hypothyroidism as a whole anyway, weight loss, fat loss, and a healthy lifestyle really all start to improve those symptoms. So if you're doing those things along with the medication, then they really are the fundamental things that you need to start thinking about. I'm sure there will be a bunch of other people all across social media and the internet telling you that there's a specific diet that's going to work for hypothyroidism and it's going to be this and it's special and they've got a program and they've got a diet plan they're going to sell you. Now, I can tell you that just focusing on the method of losing weight and losing body fat and establishing a healthy lifestyle that works for you is going to get you exponentially better results than following a fad diet for 3 months and then not really getting any sustainable change out of that. So focusing back to those basics, the principle of a calorie deficit is a principle. The principle is always the core. It's like a universal law of the universe, of physics. It is the staple from which everything else surrounds. And no method is greater than the principle. So a method being keto, being intermittent fasting, all of these various different approaches to how you might want to lose weight, they are methods. None of those override the principle of a calorie deficit, of calories in versus calories out. So even if you're in a situation where you have hypothyroidism, where potentially if you're at a stage where you're not being medicated for it at the moment, then yes, your metabolism might be slightly lower, but the principle of a calorie deficit still applies. It's similar in someone who has PCOS. So someone who has PCOS, which is polycystic ovary syndrome, then you may again have a slightly lower metabolism that's affected by that condition in some cases. Again, the rules of energy balance still apply. It's just a shit that you have a slightly slower metabolism, so therefore you have to diet on fewer calories than the average person. But again, when we come to hypothyroidism, the medication should help relieve some of those symptoms and not make you have to diet on such low calories. So Martin, I hope this answers your question, and I hope more importantly that it helps your wife get some clarity on what she needs to do with her nutrition. Hopefully the message that's coming across is simplify. Don't worry about all these various different things that are going on. Get the right guidance from your doctor and then start to simplify. Focus on the principle of a calorie deficit, lose weight, lose body fat, have a diet that's full of nutrients and is nutrient dense, fruits, vegetables, lean meats, dairy, all of that sort of stuff, so that you have a healthy lifestyle and you are alleviating those symptoms as much as possible. So hopefully this episode of the podcast really was useful for you. And thank you so much again, Martin, for donating a small donation to the podcast, which is very, very much appreciated. Now, if you want to find out more information on how to calculate calories, which we talked about in this episode of the show, I'm going to put a link in the show notes below where you can access my free online calorie and macro calculator. From there, in about 60 seconds, if you're quick, you can figure out how many calories you need in order to achieve your goal. So whether that is losing weight, whether that's weight maintenance, or whether that's trying to be in a calorie surplus to make those gains. You can use that. There's even these cool little slider things, so you can set your deficit, whether you want to be in a big deficit or a small deficit. You can adjust those nice and easily, nice and quickly with a little slider. It's very, very cool. Now, the other thing that's pretty cool, once you get access to that, is I'll send you some free stuff that's basically going to help you give a kickstart to your lean life journey. I call it a lean life kickstart pack. So you get access to the calorie calculator for free, but also a calorie and macro guide. So that's really going to break down some of the stuff we've been talking about calorie deficit, calories in, calories out, protein, carbs, fat, nutrition labels. All of this sort of stuff is going to be explained in detail in a handy ebook for you. So you can have that for free. You can also have a free guide on how to combat cravings, because I know that's an issue for many of you out there, that you struggle with, those uncontrollable urges to eat certain foods. But there are things that you can do. Pretty simple. There's 6 things that you can do, and I put it in an ebook for you that you can get for free as well. Beyond there, I'm going to give you some professionally created recipe packs and a free 4-week training program. So really you can get kick-started to that leaner, healthier life for good. And as well, if you want to find out about online coaching with me one-to-one, so we can sort out your nutrition, sort out your training, kind of take all those headaches away, construct you a plan that gets you from A to B in the most efficient way possible, then again, there's a link for that in the show notes too. And maybe you're like Martin, you want to donate to the podcast so we can keep the lights on, we can keep the podcast running ad-free for as long as possible. That's the goal here. But for now, all I'm going to say is thanks so much for listening. Thanks so much for watching. Keep living the lean life, and I'll see you for the next episode of the show.